Right, please find example 2b and read it and make yourself familiar with it. And we'll start looking at how to analyze a mixed cost. So in this case, we've got our shipping costs, which are a mixed cost, and the managers at the company are trying to figure out what drives those shipping expenses. And they've got two possibilities, two things that could possibly be driving our shipping costs, either the number of units that we sell or the number of shipments. And there can be more or fewer units in each particular shipment. So while we generally have more units sold and more shipments happening in the same months, it's not always true. There's not a perfect relationship. So let's take a look at these two activities and our shipping costs and see if we can figure out what makes our shipping cost go up or down and which of these activities it might be. So we've got our units, our shipments, and our shipping costs. We're asked to do several things in this example. First of all, use the high-low method or the two-point method to estimate shipping expenses using units sold as the activity. Then we're going to use the high-low method using shipments as the activity to try to estimate shipping expenses. Then we're going to use regression analysis, a different approach to estimating costs using each of these two shipments. And then we're asked to make some judgments about them. The first thing you want to do before you do any sort of analysis is just sort of eyeball your data and make sure that your data actually makes sense, that there's any kind of relationship at all, and that it's basically linear. Our first chart is a chart of units sold versus shipping expenses, and there's an upward trend, as we would expect, and it's basically linear. There might be a little bit of a downward curve to it, but by and large, there's a reasonable linear relationship between units sold and shipping costs, and that's kind of a judgment call. And if we look at shipments and shipping costs, we see a much tighter pattern. We see a much more obvious upward trend, and the relationship looks a little bit stronger. So we've got these two. It does appear reasonable for both of these activities, units sold and shipping and shipments. It appears reasonable to use either one of them to try to predict shipping costs. So let's take a look at the high-low method. The high-low method, or the two-point method, is basically using our old algebraic technique of finding a slope of a line by any 2 points. And we're going to take the change in the height, the cost, as our rise, and the change in the number of shipments as our run, and we calculate the slope by rise over run. The method is called high-low, and generally what you want to do is pick a high point and a low point. You don't want to always pick the highest and the lowest, but it's nice to pick 2 points that sort of create a line that defines the data pretty well. In this case, if we pick our absolute lowest and our absolute highest, we might end up with a line that goes underneath most of the data. So I will pick the low point, and just sort of judgmentally, I'm going to pick this point right here to be a high point. You could probably also make a case for picking this point here, but I'm going to pick this point. So it's a point with 15,000 units sold, and this point up here with 36,000 units sold. So those are going to be my high and my low. So I've got a high point and a low point. And what we're going to do, as I said, is take the change in costs as our numerator, and we're going to take our units sold as our denominator. So if we look at our data, our high point was 36,000 units sold, so we'll pick that line item, and our low point was 15,000 units sold, so I'll pick that line item. So our high costs, high point costs, are 237.7, and our high number of units sold is 36,000. Our low cost is $160,300, and our low units sold is 15. And we're looking for the change. We're looking for how much the cost goes up. In algebraic terms, this would be y2 minus y1 is what's going on up here, so we'll subtract the 2. And we get a difference of $77,400. And if we subtract our units sold, we get a difference of 21,000 units sold. So what this tells us is as the number of units sold increased by 21,000 units, our cost increased by $77,400. And so then if we divide the difference in cost by the difference in units sold, what we get is the slope of the line, or in cost terms, the variable cost per unit. So I'll simply divide, and we get a number with lots of decimal places. So I'll go ahead and round. And what we find is that we get a shipping cost of $3.69 per unit sold. As the number of units sold increases so much, our shipping costs increase so much. And on average, each unit sold increases our shipping cost by $3.69. That's pretty good. We have a variable cost, but what we don't have is our fixed cost. If you remember, total cost is our total variable cost plus our total fixed cost. And so what we need to do is still figure out our total fixed cost. We've got our variable cost and we've got we don't have our fixed cost yet. What is our total variable cost? Our total variable cost is our variable cost per unit of activity, so in this case per unit sold, times units sold. So together that's going to make our total variable cost. And then our total fixed cost is just going to be our total fixed cost. So what do we know? Our variable cost per unit sold is $3.69. How can we figure out the rest? Well, we have a case. We have two cases actually, our high case and our low case, where we know a total cost and we know our units sold. So what we can do is we can plug back in our total cost and we can plug back in our units sold, and we can figure out what our total variable cost is and our total cost, and we can just solve for the fixed cost. So our total cost is $237.7. Our total variable cost is the cost per unit sold times number of units sold. In this case, it's $132,840. And if we subtract our variable cost from our total fixed cost, from our total cost, we get our total fixed cost of $104,860. So we now have estimates of both our variable cost per unit and our fixed cost. So we can say our shipping cost is $3.69 per unit shipped plus $104,860 per month. That's our estimate of shipping costs using the high-low method as our method and using units sold as our activity.